Hello, and welcome to yet another geek show where insert funny joke here. I'm your host, Alex Ecker.
I'm your host, Dalton Munnell.
Josh still isn't here, by the way.
Oh, man, I hadn't even noticed. I was waiting for him right there.
So, Dalton, what have you been doing this week?
I've been continuing to binge watch Game of Thrones.
Okay.
Yeah, last week I mentioned I'd finished season 1. This time I finished season 2. I don't know if I really have a lot to say about this because it's not my first time through. I'm just trying to rewatch it before the next season comes out. So I don't know if I can really build on what I said last week other than that this series is perfect.
Fair enough. When does the new season come out? I know it's in April, but what day?
Alexa, when does Game of Thrones return?
Season 8 of Game of Thrones will return to HBO Sunday, April 14th. The 6-episode season will be the conclusion to the series.
Well, there you go.
That works.
That worked.
Oh, man. Well,
so I don't have a lot of time, is what she's saying there.
Gotcha. Well, I guess I can start off with my VR game of the week.
Go for it. Is it the same as mine?
Stealing your bit. Well, no, I did play what you played, but I was going to talk about Superhot because this game is awesome.
Okay. Go for it.
Okay, so those who aren't familiar with Superhot, it started off as a regular PC game where it was just a mouse and keyboard kind of thing. But the gimmick of this game is time moves only when you move. And it's a lot of fun, but they adapted it to VR, and oh man, is it even worse? Like, not that it's like a bad game; it's an incredibly fun game, but it is super hard in VR just because, like, for me at least, with the Windows Mixed Reality headset, sometimes my controllers won't catch because they're camera sensitive instead of light sensitive or infrared, whatever the Vive does. I can't remember. And so if they're out of my sight, they'll disappear and like go like 30 feet across the fucking room and they'll make everybody move and then I'll die.
I was surprised to hear that you tried to play this in your smaller play space. Like, I have a pretty big area dedicated to this and I feel like I used it when I played through this.
I mean, I did a little bit of organizing around my studio and I got a little bit more room out of it.
Okay.
So, I mean, it wasn't too bad. There were a couple of times where I reached out to grab like a weapon from an enemy to shoot them with their own weapon. And like I'd punch my microphone or like accidentally like hit my desk. But other than that, I didn't have a terrible time with it.
Yeah.
However, that might be my only time for this bit for a little while because my VR headset broke on me. Not because I didn't have enough room and headbutted something or anything. No, the padding that goes on the edges to like give comfort to your face. They're attached by Velcro, which is then glued to a piece of foam. And since I'm such a sweaty bitch, the glue decided to dissolve and break and ripped the Velcro. So I have to figure out what I need to replace that particular thing. So it's probably going to be a couple weeks before I can play.
Yeah. So that said, it's worth noting that Superhot VR is a newly built from the ground up game, and it's not just the Superhot campaign with VR thrown into it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a totally different it's a totally different campaign. It's not an identical game at all. And so judging by your reaction there, you haven't played the original. I was going to ask if you did because I haven't. And I know that game had a killer reputation already before the VR port. But man, I can't imagine going backwards to it.
Right. Yeah. I didn't realize that the campaigns were completely different.
Like, this is one of the best games VR's got, and I can't imagine, trying to go back and play the original and having that functionality ripped out of it. So I feel like if we went back to it, we wouldn't appreciate it the way we're supposed to.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. But yeah, if I think the VR version would have spoiled me immediately trying to go back to like the original campaign on mouse and keyboard, just because like it feels so natural playing the game like that instead of mouse and keyboard. Like I don't even have to play the original one to know, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's a really cool experience. It's a Matrix simulator, as I like to call it.
It's really funny because since you said that, there's a particular point where I was like, all right, there's 3 guys in front of me. They're all about to fire at me. I'm going to do a Matrix and dodge everything. And the game gave me like an in-screen achievement of doing the Matrix move. Because they'll give you certain things, like a sticky note will fall out of the real life reality into your virtual reality, and it'll give you like a note saying that you did something cool. Mm-hmm. Man, that sounded really clunky the way I said that.
Yeah, well, especially since we didn't give the preamble that this is a meta VR game where there's VR within VR. To be honest, I'm kind of sick of that gimmick already, but this was one of the first VR games, so whatever.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And then I suppose that should lead into your VR game of the week, though.
I have several.
Oh, shit, do you? I didn't. Well, I know at least one of them.
Yeah, well, I decided to compensate for the week that I missed a VR game and for the potential of me not being on the show next week, but we'll see what we can do. Yeah, so I'm going to start with, Alex, I've shown you this game already before, but Redout.
Which one was that?
Does that ring a bell? It's F-Zero-esque. Not ringing a bell? I swear I've shown you this. Anyway,
it rings a bell. I just can't remember it.
Yeah, so it's not a built for VR game. The VR was added later. And like, I loved the F-Zero games growing up, and there hasn't been an F-Zero game since the GameCube. And so if you're looking for that, like, this is the best you got. In the sense that, you know, you get in a hover vehicle and you start going 300-400 miles an hour, and, you know, through really cool sci-fi environments with exciting music. And I bought this game maybe 2 or 3 years ago, actually, just because I felt like it would be a great demonstration of my computer monitor, which is 1440p, 144 hertz. I figured, oh, what a better way to enjoy that high frame rate.
Yeah.
And the game runs well, and it looks ridiculously good on that screen. And so I decided to give it a shot in VR recently. I tried to give it a shot in VR a couple years ago, and I don't know if I was just having issues at the time or if they've fixed it since, but it didn't really work well at the time. I don't remember what I didn't like about it. I just know that I tried it and something wasn't right, and I said, I'll go back to my screen. In any case, this time, it is a really cool experience, but I'm still just going to stick to the screen, honestly. People really into racing games, more so into simulator games, not arcade type games like this, but like VR has been a really big deal for those people. And so I'd like to try more VR racing, but the field of view in a VR headset is just not there yet, unless you're one of the lucky few that has a Pimax right now. The resolution's not really there. Like you take a big hit in both of those ways going in VR. And like, I'm used to playing with my high refresh rate, so that takes a hit when I go to VR too. And all that aside, it is really cool and it works really well. But my one big flaw, and I'm not really sure what they can do about this, is that the sense of scale, it's not what I expected it to be. I didn't realize, because there's no point of reference, that your vehicle isn't supposed to be the size of a car. It seemed like, sitting in the cockpit looking around, it seemed like my vehicle was the size of my room.
Okay.
Like my VR play space is 10 foot by 10 foot, and I swear the vehicle was taking up all of it.
Oh, that's
and
weird.
Going up to the ceiling. And so I couldn't, like, maybe you get used to it, but I just didn't feel like I could control my vehicle well enough to play something this fast while the vehicle was that large. Like, on a screen, I'm playing it in third person, and, I have more leeway to, take really tight turns and everything and see what my vehicle's doing. And I just, without that perspective, I don't know, I couldn't feel like I could get a good grip on the controls here. Another element that doesn't translate really well is that this being a hover vehicle, they added like a control element where you kind of control it with dual joysticks. So the left joystick does everything you would normally expect in a racing game, but the right kind of like what are the words I'm looking for? You can use it to roll your vehicle left and right or rock it forward and back, and that affects your movement. So like when you're going up a hill, you have to tilt the vehicle back with your right joystick.
Okay.
And that specific movement ends up being really problematic here because you'll go off a huge ramp and you'll pull that stick back because you're going up the ramp. And then once you're in the air, you can't see the track to land back down on it because you're sitting in the cockpit and looking up.
Okay, yeah.
So the VR is kind of fundamentally broken right there. You're totally screwed anytime you go off a ramp because you can't see below you.
Yeah, that would be a definite game breaker for me.
Yeah, so that said, I love and adore Redout. It's incredible, but not for VR.
Yeah, unless they like threw a thing in where like it's a futuristic game, right? Mm-hmm. Why don't they make your screen like your windshield on your vehicle also a monitor, and then like have a camera that's on the end of the car, so that way you could see what's going on in front of you when you're up in the air like that.
Or maybe just make your vehicle become invisible or see-through and let you look down. When it's in the air, just have everything go clear so you can look down through it.
Yeah.
So yeah, sure. There are solutions there they could try to implement. Yeah. I don't know if that many people are actually playing it in VR and if they would bother to improve it at this point. But yeah, that would be a massive fix right there, is dealing with that problem.
Okay. Yeah, that's very true. I think we're probably both going to want to talk about this game here. If you're ready to move on.
I have another music game, VR game before that one. I just spoiled it. We both played a music game.
Yeah, we did. Well, go on with the other music game.
Do you remember Soundboxing?
Yeah.
Okay, very similar to Audio Shield that I talked about last week, in that it's a VR music rhythm game where the orbs are coming at you, and in Audio Shield you just have to catch them with a shield, but in Soundboxing you have to punch. Now, some fundamental differences here, though, are, well, A, having to punch, it just makes it feel more, it makes it more active. It's a better workout. It makes it more thrilling than Audio Shield, where you just kind of wave your hands in front of you and wait for things to run into you.
Yeah, so, it's more engaging, I would say.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, so there's that. Another thing I really like is that the orbs, I complained in Audio Shield about orbs coming at you from out of your field of view. Well, in Soundboxing, and I haven't seen another VR rhythm game do this, but the game actually draws a line from each orb to the next one for each side. So all your left orbs and all your right orbs are connected by a line. And what this means is that nothing ever comes from out of field of view. It means you never have one orb being obscured by another orb. Like, you know what I mean? Like two orbs could be coming at you directly at eye line, and you'd never know in something like Audio Shield. But here, oh, you can't see that line. There must be another orb right behind this one I can't see.
Okay, yeah.
So I really like that about it. But the biggest change when these were two of the bigger deals before Beat Saber took over is that Audio Shield automatically generated all the levels, but this one, like the Beat Saber modding community, relies on user-made levels. So that's a taste thing. Like, I liked that in Audio Shield. I said before, I have a really picky taste in music, and it was appreciated that I could play anything I wanted. But in Soundboxing, you just have better potential for better maps to happen. The one thing I really didn't like about the game at that time, though, was that there's a functionality where the people making the beat maps can make the notes coming at you, the orbs, be as spaced out as far as they possibly want. They can be as high up as they want and as low as they want. And in Beat Saber, this hasn't been an issue because you're not hitting with your hands. You have lightsabers. But here, you're kind of limited by your own body, whether you can reach the notes or not physically. They're coming at you faster than Beat Saber. You can't quickly move across the room to get from one note to another. And if if they're putting the notes 1.5 feet above your head, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
And their solution to this was that there's a scaling feature where, like, before you go into a level, it'll show you like a preview of like the approximate location of each note. And you can kind of stretch that map and move it to be as tall or as short as you want it to put everything in a more focused area. But it punishes your score if you do that.
Oh, that's bullshit.
Yeah, so if you shrink it to 90% of the size, you get 90% of the score, and then you could finish that map 100% perfect and still lose to everybody. Now, I don't know.
Fair.
Yeah, so I don't know what the right solution to that problem is, if there is one, but it led to me having the same issue I had with Audio Shield, where there's no goals in the game. There's no pre-made levels. There's no campaign. There's no, here's what you need to achieve. Just, here's some high scores that you'll realistically never have a shot with.
Yeah. You know, the only thing I could think of that would fix that 90% or below is making a tier bracket. You know, like if you're going to go for the 100% range, then you're in the 100% range bracket. So if you score 100% on 100%, you're the top level. But if you score 100% on 90%, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would make a lot more sense instead of
You're doing a good
player.
job solving these problems. I like that.
Yeah. Well, you know, but like that's the thing that's frustrating. Like that honestly kind of pisses me off, just because like if you have a disability or have an injury that, you know, crutched movement, you're immediately disqualified from being in a good part of the leaderboard if this is something you really want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just not fair.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a limit to how much they can do to help you if you're someone with a physical disability and you're trying to compete in something that is physical. But yeah, this is something they can easily compensate for, and I think that's a good solution. And they could choose between, like, maybe you end up in a different ranking depending on the level, like by percent, because if one person makes a more spread apart map than another, that changes how far you have to shrink it. Or they could do like a really hard coded thing where, if the furthest notes are this far apart, that's this ranking, and do it that way. And you can just permanently say, give me maps where the orbs are at most this far apart. Yeah, I think that's a really legit solution that could help a lot.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
jumping
definitely.
back into this game, I have the same criticisms I've always had for it. I don't really have a whole lot of praise anymore because Beat Saber just whooped its ass. And I think a lot of the community is just gone, having moved on to better things.
Right.
Browsing the music inside the game wasn't really working, and it's a similar thing to Audio Shield, where the maps are based on like a YouTube video. So you'll see the YouTube video playing in the background while someone's map is coming at you over top of it. And so like browsing the YouTube videos available, it was like I picked rock, but there was almost no rock in it because it couldn't actually find any because people aren't contributing anymore.
Yeah.
Or maybe that was just a bad algorithm. I don't know what happened there, but it just seems like a dead game. And it hasn't been updated in a good year. And I don't remember if the game considers itself early access or not, but the game's been abandoned for about a year now. So that's would have highly recommended a year and a half ago. Do not at all recommend today.
Yeah. No, I can see why.
Every time I talk about a VR rhythm game, I'm just going to say I recommend Beat Saber.
Yeah. No,
I've played Beat Saber again every single week we've recorded this show. But I can't talk about it every week. So
gonna go off on a bit of a tangent now that it had something that was relatable here. Since we've kind of stuck to this weekly schedule, it's kind of difficult to keep adding new things to what we're doing without finishing something else in a meaningful time.
yeah. Well, maybe it means we all need to start watching more movies, because those are things we can finish in a timely basis. But when I say, hey guys, what are you playing? And you're all like, oh, I started Kingdom Hearts 3. Oh, okay. Well, I can see you're not going to finish any games for the next 3 weeks. So
I mean, to be fair, I beat the game in a week.
yeah.
And
so speaking of which, I just started Yakuza Kiwami, which is one that's going to take me a while. And so instead, I'll talk about Yakuza 0, which I finished a few months ago. But, you know, I would feel really weird about like Yakuza. I think there's 6 main titles now, and 0, a prequel, came out and I played that, and now Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of the first one, and eventually I'll end up playing all of these. But man, I would feel really weird about having one game in the series at some point that I didn't talk about on the show.
Yeah.
So I didn't play Yakuza 0 this week. I played it last year, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
Well, before we get into that, do you want to talk about the VR game that we both played?
Well, no, because I already gave enough of a preamble there. I don't want to jump around. So I'll make this quick because I'm going to be talking about Kiwami soon anyway.
Yeah, true.
All right, are you familiar with Yakuza at all?
No, not at all. All I know is what is it? It's a Namco game, isn't it?
This is Sega.
Oh, it's Sega. I didn't realize that.
This is Sega, and Sega's been really kicking ass at getting as much of their games as possible onto PC now.
Yeah.
So Yakuza 0 is a prequel that came out a few years ago. It hit PC last year, and it's a really good starting point for a franchise that's actually been going for a while, given that it is a prequel. That makes sense. But yeah, I felt like this was a really good place to be thrown in. And so anyway, the general idea is this is an open world game in Japan, and Yakuza is pretty much like Japan's version of the Mafia. Like, this is the crime gang in Japan.
Yeah. Well, I know
and
what
so,
the Yakuza is, so.
Yeah. So Yakuza 0, your character is basically like new to this world. Like, you're raised by someone who's important in the Yakuza, and you're kind of just getting started. So in future games, you're a pretty big, important head honcho, and this is like your start of being involved in this life. And so the fascinating thing to this game for me, though, and I've never played Grand Theft Auto, so I don't know if those games pull this off too, but this game simultaneously manages to be deadly serious about all the crime lord stuff and all the drama, but then it's also ridiculously over the top silly, like the most Japanese thing I've ever seen. So you can have like one scene where somebody you really love considers killing you just because they know that the Yakuza are going to kill you even worse than they will. You'll get something deadly serious like that. Okay. And then you'll also get a scene where there's a character who's a Michael Jackson parody, and you have to protect him from zombies while he dances down an alleyway as part of a music video. So that's the dichotomy we're talking about here.
All right.
The voice acting is strictly Japanese. There is no English dub.
Oh, that's cool.
And it might be, we've talked about listening to Japanese dubs before, and we did make the point that I can't fairly judge them because I don't really know like how this comes off to people that speak the language, but I feel like this might be one of the best video game dubs I've ever heard. Really? I don't mean best like Japanese audio I've listened to. I mean, this might be the best voice acting I've heard in a video game.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's some serious movie quality shit going on.
Huh. You have me intrigued already, just because like this game feels very vastly different from being serious to funny and still being coherent. And I don't know, I have a thing for voice acting, so I may just have to check this out just for the voice acting.
Yeah, that voice acting's utterly killer. The story is super killer. If you don't have a lot of patience, though, for dialogue and cutscenes getting in your way, this is not for you, because there have definitely been points in the game where I've sat down the controller, went, oh, and waited 20 minutes to be participating in the game again.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those kinds of things, but it's a great, compelling story, and I didn't skip through any of it. But then the side content, man, there's so much of it. And when I say this is an open world, this is like the smallest open world you'll ever see. But yet it has some of the largest amount of content you'll ever see. At the same time, though, they really value squeezing a lot of shit into a tiny space. So like whoever I'm talking to, like the open world of this game is almost certainly smaller than the town you live in. But if you're trying to 100% this thing, you're definitely going to give it like 120 hours.
Oh, wow.
Even though you can do the main story in like 20.
Okay.
And so when I
okay.
say there's a ton of side content, I don't just mean the RPG thing of, oh, hey, can you go kill this guy and steal back this thing he stole from me and bring it back to me? Or, hey, can you go spy on my husband and make sure he's not doing anything weird and report back to me? It's not the same generic shit. This game basically has other full-fledged games built into it.
Really?
So I'm talking, this game has like a karaoke rhythm game. I'm talking, it has like a speed dating game. It has a really developed like slot car racing game.
Oh, wow.
Where like throughout the world you have to obtain parts that make your slot car better. It has a bunch of like bar games, like billiards and darts and poker, and they're all developed to a level where like you'd probably spend $5 to buy them separately outside of this game if you saw them on Steam.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, bowling and just the amount of effort that goes into all of this is absolutely ridiculous.
Is this the newest game in the series?
Since Yakuza, there's been Yakuza Kiwami, which I'm playing right now, that just recently came out on Steam. That's a remake of the first. And there's Yakuza Kiwami 2, which is again a remake of Yakuza 2. I think that might only be out in Japan so far. Or if it is out in America, it's only on the PS4. So I guess this would be 3 games ago.
So we're probably looking at a time frame of from now to like anywhere between 3 and 10 years ago.
This game's maybe 3 years old.
3 years old. Okay.
Something like that.
Okay, yeah, that's still fairly impressive.
And it's like not a AAA game. It's like a AA game. The budget is somewhere in the middle, but man, they stretched that money so far in terms of building so much unique content. I mean, there's an arcade that you go into and like you play like Space Harrier and a couple other Sega games, and then there's like a claw machine game with like submissions involving getting stuff out of a claw machine. It's so much effort. And then like the character models and textures are really good, but then they kind of cut corners on the graphics of the environment itself.
Yeah.
But then they put that money into better places by just creating more content.
Yeah. Which actually kind of brings up a good question that I want to ask you right now. Would you rather have a smaller map on a game with more content or a larger map with some unique missions here and there?
My answer to that is that Assassin's Creed Unity is a way better game than Assassin's Creed Origins.
Fair enough. Yeah, because like I'm sitting here and I'm listening to you talk and I'm thinking, wow, for, you know, you said it's a small map, but they have tons of different things. And I'm thinking of games like Breath of the Wild where, yeah, the game is really good and there's a lot to do, but some of the missions kind of feel repeaty. You know, same thing with like Kingdom Hearts, like the newest one where it was fight, watch a cutscene for 10 minutes, run around, fight, repeat.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really a case by case basis for me where, yeah, if you're going to make a big open worldy kind of game, you have to have some sort of unique mission in there that you can go back to and think like, man, this was my favorite when I played this a year or two ago. Yeah. And like, cause it's kind of frustrating. Like, do you mind if I go to a game that I'm playing right now?
I guess I'll just finish up with a couple more really quick points. I didn't mention the combat at all, which is the primary gameplay. It's hard for me to really insist if it's good or bad because I don't play other games in this genre. Like I haven't played a Shenmue or a Grand Theft Auto, and like I don't really know what to compare this to that I've played, but it felt good to me. This system of like it takes skill. And you have to level up your character in several different fighting styles and choose which one to use accordingly based on who you're fighting. And you have to get good with each style. And it takes really good reflexes and thought. And I find that really compelling. And it makes you feel like an utter badass when like the series really is really not generous with checkpoints, and they will gladly throw you into a building and be like, hey, whoop everyone's ass in this building plus a couple boss fights and don't lose because we're sending you back. And it never makes me mad. It just makes me feel like a badass when I finally get it. So that's super cool. And also the soundtrack is super badass, and look that up because it probably sounds exactly like what you were imagining when I described this game.
Something very Sega-esque. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so this game is actually running as we're talking.
Discord says Brutal Legend.
Yep, Brutal Legend. Okay. This kind of flows into my question I asked you. For those who don't know, Brutal Legend is a game starring Jack Black as a character known as Eddie Riggs. Dalton, are you familiar with this game?
Vaguely. Like, I haven't played it, but I remember getting excited for it when it was new, and I've seen enough video of it.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the opening of the game here. The game starts off with Eddie Riggs, who is a roadie. He's the crew for this shitty band because he's back in like the 70s, 80s rock and roll metal style. And this new band comes on and they start with this like evil chuggy riff. And then he's like bobbing his head to it. And he's like, okay, this may not be that bad. And then all he hears is a turntable going, ebra, ebra, ebra. And then they start dancing and singing, and it's awful. And he ends up trying to save the one kid because he decided to go up on this set that he built on a part that was breaking off. He saves the kid and dies in return. And when he dies, he has a belt buckle, and he gets some of his blood in the belt buckle, and it transports him back to an ancient time where metal is the world. Okay. I absolutely love this game, but the one thing that I kind of wish they did was make the map a little bit smaller than it was and add a little more to it, because there's such a world here that you get enveloped in. Like, quite frankly, half the time I'm mostly enjoying just driving around and listening to music in your character's car, which the car's name is the Druid Plow.
Okay.
You get a radio in it a little later on after you get the car, and it's something like all the music is stuff that I wouldn't normally like listen to at all. Blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, there's bands in here that I wouldn't have even given a second chance. But like driving around in this world, it's kind of like, yeah, I might check them out because they're really not bad. Or I don't know, man. The aesthetic in this game is wonderful. I do have to say the combat, I wish there was a little more of it. Because I mean, let's be fair. They made a game that was you were fighting demons with music, and they fight you back with music. Because his guitar goes back in time with him too, and when you play power chords on it, they shoot lightning at your enemies and shit.
So you're describing pretty much exactly what I expected out of this game, and kind of like honestly why I haven't gotten around to it, even though I've owned it for years and you're playing my copy right now. Yeah. But I always got the vibe that like it would make me laugh, but the game itself wouldn't be that great. Like it was kind of just about appreciating Jack Black and appreciating the humor regarding metal if you're into metal, and regarding fantasy if you're into fantasy, but that the game itself is just kind of an excuse for the jokes.
Well, for one, who's the guy? Brian
Posehn?
Bowler? Or the guy that made the Cookie Monster medal?
Brian Posehn.
He's in this game.
So I could have guessed that.
Yeah. But the game, I don't know, man. It's super cheesy and it picks on itself, but it's also got such a weird charm about it that you just enjoy every second of it, regardless of like certain game bugs or certain choices and dialogue that are just like, oh, come on, really. But honestly, I don't think this game would have been that good if they didn't get Jack Black to be in it.
Right. So like the Deadpool video game, I don't know if you ever played it or saw me play it, but it's a similar thing where, it's a similar thing where I think it's a worthwhile game and it's hilarious. And I played through it twice because I enjoyed it, but it's mostly because I'm into Deadpool's humor. And if it were the same exact gameplay without Deadpool and X-Men slapped into it, yeah, no one would have ever talked about it. It would have been nothing special.
Yeah. It's kind of tough because I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think you're right, like in the regards of Brutal Legend too, because I'm trying to think if they had anybody else play the character of Eddie Riggs, and Jack Black just delivers lines in such a smooth and clean way.
But even past him and just the entire idea of the game, if you kept identical gameplay but ripped away the metal comedy theming, like if you reskinned it into like a God of War game, or not a great example because God of War is super exciting, but if it were reskinned as some other IP that wasn't humor based, like would the gameplay really stand up? It would probably just be passable.
If it were that way, then it would just be a online multiplayer game. You'd have to play the game for that to make sense, because there's certain parts in the game that, well, they base their online multiplayer mechanic on it. But I think you're right. This game probably would not stand out if it weren't for Jack Black. But honestly, that's what makes this game so great for me. Like I said, just because of his commentary or the way he delivers his lines, it's just a lot of fun. And the thing is like with the audio, you have to take your time and listen to the dialogue in certain spots, because it does that thing that like Sonic Adventure 2 did when it got translated to English from Japanese.
Okay.
Or from Japanese to English, sorry. Where the lines will like run over themselves if you don't progress the way that they want you to.
Okay. Little lack of polish there.
Yeah. But I mean, other than that, this game is really fun, and I highly recommend it if you're a metalhead and love the cheesiness of like the Dio music videos and like Black Sabbath.
Yeah, so recommended for fans of Metalocalypse.
Funny enough, because Metalocalypse is in this game, like their music is.
Oh, Death Clock. Okay.
Yeah, Death Clock, sorry. All
right. Well, while we're on a roll with music, onto the VR game you mentioned earlier, our VR game of the week, our fourth one, is actually Electronauts.
Yeah.
How much time did you get with this before your headset broke?
Before we went on our double date.
Okay, so like 15 minutes.
Closer to a half hour.
Okay, I've played for about an hour and a half, and man, am I bummed that happened before we got to try the multiplayer.
Right.
So here's what we're going to do. On this week, in the description, I'm going to put Dalton plays Electronauts, and then when your headset is fixed and you get to play for a little while longer, we'll put the episode description Alex plays Electronauts.
Well, I mean, I got enough to understand the gist of it. It's not like I got to be in depth, but
well, I say that because we're going to bring it up again after we get to try the multiplayer.
Oh, true enough.
All right, but so this game, it's not a game.
It's an experience.
Yeah, and I guess there's plenty of VR that's like that, but this is not a game. It's not a VR rhythm game, and it's a live DJ simulator. I guess so. It's hard to put into words because I feel like they've created a new art form here. Like when I say there's a VR experience, often I'm talking about like maybe like a short film. There's like The Blue, where it's just the whale swimming by you underwater, or there's Titanic VR, where you experience the Titanic sinking in like a virtual reality rendering of it with a story. That's normally what I think when I hear VR experience, but this is fully interactive, and there are other like music type of things in VR that aren't rhythm games, but they're more oriented at there's games that market themselves as like being a way to create music in VR.
Yeah.
And none of it's really good. Like none of them that I've tried, and it's been a long time since I tried, but like a year and a half ago, I tried 3 or 4 of them, and it was all stuff where it was like, oh, this technically works, but it'd be working better if I was just in a DAW on my monitor. Like, this is not a good way to work on music. And so this isn't that either. This isn't a way for you to make music. This is a way for you to interact with music, and it's a new experience. It's an art form where, they're bringing you a song, but then they're saying, here's your options on how to interact with it. And there is a lot of leeway. It's not just, oh, I want to hear the intro and then the verse and then the chorus and make this part go next. It's no, you actually do get to play melodies here, and it lets you get away with doing a lot of stuff on the fly. And what's really nice about it is that it doesn't let you do anything wrong. So like you don't have to be a musician to enjoy this. So yeah, and so it has the side effect of like you never get exactly what you expected to hear. Like when you try to play a melody on the instrument that's basically like a xylophone made of orbs, it never comes out with the timing you expected, because what happens is it'll look at the note you played but then trigger it on the next beat that happens. And so that feels like latency, but what's really happening is it's not letting you play anything that's bad.
Right.
It's saying we
letting
gave
you
you
still
these
feel the
choices
groove.
of notes that we know will work on any of the chords in the backing tracks that we gave you, and we're going to make sure they're always on beat. And like there's that grenade system. You can grab these grenades and throw them and they'll explode and trigger a sample. And it's like you kind of got to throw them the beat before you want them to, because that sample will get triggered on the next beat. That's just how it makes sure that maybe it's not exactly what you intended, but it's going to come out sounding good.
Right. Or
you can
organized is the correct word there, I think.
Maybe.
Because,
yeah.
I mean, if you want to throw an offbeat sound to throw the listener or keep them intrigued instead of just having a constant 1, 2, 3, 4, you know.
Well, now that you mention it, it would be nice if it gave you some options that are like specifically for more experienced musicians. So you could be like, hey, I have a better sense of timing than most people. Maybe instead of quantizing these grenades to the next beat, you can do it like on the next eighth note for me.
Right.
Let it expand your options a little bit there.
Yeah.
In any case,
I think that would help.
In any case, I don't know how much I'm thinking like a musician when I'm in there, other than having a decent sense of rhythm. Like, I just feel like I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, I had that same thing where it was just like, you know, we're both guitarists, and I'm sure you've had this too, where you go in and type on YouTube, G Aeolian backing track, for example, and you get a track and you just jam along to it. Where this game kind of gives me that same feeling. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a relatable feeling for sure. And so it's kind of like, you know how like someone who's not a guitar player, like us before we were guitar players, could play Guitar Hero and just have a little bit of that sensation of being a guitar player, just the littlest bit. Like this does give you the tiniest bit of the thrill of being someone that knows what they're doing with electronic music. You don't know what you're doing. You don't use any actual musical skills here, but it gives you enough control while guaranteeing that you can't screw anything up, that like you just feel like you're having a really legit relationship with this music, down to like the backing track. You can like arrange it on the fly, and so it'll be broken into maybe here's an intro and a build up and a verse and a chorus and a drop and an outro, and you can tell it to switch between those whenever you want. But if it's playing like the build up and then you want the drop and you click the button that says drop, it doesn't do it immediately, because if you have no sense of rhythm or musical skill, you probably just butchered the song. But what it'll do is it'll wait until the current 4-bar loop is over and then switch.
Right.
And if you have a decent sense of timing and understand arranging music, then you can play around with like kind of synchronizing, in the sense that like what I'll do is I'll have it doing one piece of the backing track and I'll like turn off certain instruments as it's going. I'll like cut out the kick drum, then cut out the snare, then cut out the synth, and then watch and wait for it to be about to trigger the drop. And then as soon as it does, I'll hit the unmute button on everything in the backing track. And I'll hit clear on one of my melody instruments, and I'll start recording something new at the same time.
See, you got a lot more involved with it than I did.
So like it'll let you work with both hands at once, and you get to do that kind of thing. You can, with your right hand, like drum on your little orb xylophone to your right while you play with the effects square in front of you.
See, like my big thing was messing with the envelope filter that you get. I was using that a lot of the time instead of cutting on instruments to make a drop happen, where I would flip that in, draw my pattern, and then as soon as that would, you know, make its course, I'd hurry up and hit the drop and then have things do it. I mean, I would still be cutting on instruments and everything, but a lot of the time I just kind of got lost and kept throwing grenades and hoping they would land on my character's face.
Yeah, it also has really cool third-person features where, like, you could theoretically live stream this game while, like, positioning a camera just where you want it to show off an avatar of your body. This is just a really well-polished thing. This is... I think their name is Survios, Survios. They made Raw Data and Sprint Vector, and they just kill it with making really. Oh, I think they made Creed too. They just kill it with making really well polished stuff in VR.
Yeah.
They're not making my favorite VR games, but they're making the most professional, polished VR games.
Yeah, they make the games that feel good, you know, like
they feel like money was put into them.
Yeah. They're not compelling stories, you know, something that's going to go right to the hearts and the feels, but they're a lot of fun, and they're a good show-offy thing to make people go, hey, I might buy a Vive or a WMR or an Oculus.
Oh yeah, I've sold people with Raw Data.
Yeah, I was probably one of them. Except my computer can't run Raw Data because it sucks.
Well, we'll fix that eventually.
Yeah.
In any case, so those were our 4 VR games of the week.
Oh, wow.
By the time you're hearing this episode, we've put out spotlights on Jordan Peele's Get Out and Us. So look for those. There won't be a spotlight this week, but there were 2 last week. So catch up.
Yeah. Get on our level.
Yeah. And thanks for listening.
Have fun. Goodbye.